the engraver is very influenced by Greco-Roman finds from the century before. And he's also very much influenced by things that have already been published from the 1500s, and they deal with Florida or Puerto Rico or the mouth of the Amazon River. They're tropical, and you'll notice that there are these sort of, you're not sure whether they're weeping willow or something that comes. They're probably things that come out straight out of what's been produced to illustrate even Florida would be a possibility, you see. And the engraver doesn't know any better, so he's going to put a North America, not even north, just an American tree right there.
Yeah.
You know, and we say, oh, that doesn't belong there. And in the same way, we could say that the armor that probably that armor would have sunk the canoe, no matter how good it was made.
Yeah.
And so it's unlikely that he wore that kind of an outfit. In all likelihood, but we'll never know, the engraver knew what a military costume was at the time or one generation before.
And that's what we saw.
Put Champlain in it.
Yeah.
It's also important to remember that we have no idea what Champlain looked like. When the time came to produce illustration about Champlain, and this was in the late 1800s, somebody took an etching from his period of a court official who had something to do with finance under the Medici, and simply turned him into Champlain. Made a few changes to the etching and said Samuel de Champlain under it. So we have very little to go on in terms of what Champlain looked like. We have this man with this musketeer mustache, musketeer hat sometime, long hair, and a little babiche under it, what's called in French a guernon.
Yes.
And in all likelihood, Champlain was a beardless man. And I covered that in my my little pamphlet on Champlain, because the Indians were wary of people having any kind of a beard. They saw that as unmanly and undignified. And given the respect with which they treated Champlain, whether they were his enemy or his ally, it's quite unlikely that he would have been as well received as he was if he had worn a beard of any kind.
And you talk about the indigenous people. Again, we see on the statue the Native American crouching at his feet, but in reality, did he have a very good relationship with a number of tribes and tribal leaders? Did he depend on them to be his guides to bring him from Quebec?
Yeah, well,
down?
you know, Champlain parachuted in a world that was changing very rapidly. Jacques Cartier had come 50 plus years before, and he had made notes about the native population that he met, including some vocabulary. And when Champlain tried to use those words, he noticed that nobody could understand what he was saying. So the landscape, the human landscape, changed dramatically. And so Champlain parachuted into a world that was changing very, very rapidly because of the arrival of the European. And it had an effect on all of Eastern North America as a first stage, of course. Eventually we go all the way to the Pacific. But the world as it was before suddenly changed. First, because of disease brought by European contact, and B, by warring faction, warring tribes, because they were all trying to be the ones who would trade with mostly fishermen in Nova Scotia or what's now New Brunswick or Maine or even farther down so all of that now is documented, and we can see that what all of that led to was the Five-Nation Confederacy and their war and their attempt to dominate the fur trade by going to war with other Iroquoian nations north of the Great Lakes, and also with all the other groups which were different, and the difference was noted in the language. So we have three major language groups, and they're all at war with each other. And the people who have really an advantage are the Five Nations. So we tend today to see those people as not just the dominant group, but the one that we should be most proud of.
When Champlain came across the border, was he primarily on a mission to look for trading partners?
Yes, he had no choice. I mean, as a person, he was an extremely inquisitive man. So you could say he enjoyed his work, but his job was to maintain a trading post. So his job was not originally, his mission was not originally to be a colonizer. And in fact, it took him many decades before he could bring permanent settlers to Quebec City, and then eventually Three Rivers up the St. Lawrence. The people who were investing in a fur trade simply would not allow him to bring people to what was beginning to be called New France in a way that or on the terms that would make them permanent settlers with a piece of land and other anchor to the St. Lawrence Valley. And so it's not until the very end, when Champlain returns for a last time, that we see not a massive influx of people, but the beginning of a permanent colony. So when we say Quebec was founded in 1608, we quickly have to add as a trading post and not as a city, or nothing similar to Jamestown or what the Pilgrims did in Massachusetts.